and make speeches throughout the community that just moved one. And when people in the community had grievances or had problems, they would go to Mr. Tenor and ask him to speak on their behalf. And when Henderson and Tenor came together, they were two of the strongest voices in the community, very verbal and very visible. And the other men who were also leaders in the community, some were skilled tradesmen, some others were ministers, and coming together, they pooled the strengths of the community. And that was the way that the group was able to move forward in a way that not only helped Falls Church African Americans, but eventually helped African Americans throughout the state. And as I mentioned before, they developed tactics that were adopted all across the United States. So that makes what happened here even more important when you realize that they were on the ground floor of getting equal education, getting rights that were commonly withheld, particularly in rural areas.
I want to ask one last question and we're going to wrap it up.
It must have been quite a pair, though. You had one that was an orator and you had one that was a writer. They covered.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Yeah. Well, let's one last question or topic. Let's go into the area of the churches. How well did the two, Tenor and Henderson, work with the churches? What were the church communities like? I know there are two churches here. There's one in Merrifield. It seems like the families were kind of crossing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it seems from the records that we found, and actually attending the churches, you had Tenors, you had Hendersons, you had Bryces, you had Richardsons in both churches. Now, the church that seems to have been the most active during the later years, or the later years of the Civil Rights Movement was Second Baptist. A number of meetings were held there, and a number of activities were jump-started there at Second Baptist. However, Galloway seems to have taken a lead role in education, because when Galloway built their first church in 1869, I believe it was, when they built that church, they also built.
So wait, that was 1867 when it was built? Okay.
Behind the church, they built a structure that would function as a school. So that early education thread that we talked about, that went from meeting in the log cabin, that started in the balconies of the white churches and led to the log cabin and on to the homes of the African American citizens who were seeking education, and then to Fairfax County. You can follow the leaders and the church members of Galloway and Second Baptist throughout that whole evolution.
Let me speak to that as well. The churches were the backbone of community, and that's, it was, the whole social structure was built around the churches. Most of after Joseph Tenor, it seems that the majority of the presidents of the local NAACP were the ministers of the churches. You had Reverend Powell, who was the minister at Second Baptist, and after him you had Reverend Costner. And I would say that Second Baptist was more of the activist church, but there was representation from both churches in the workings of the local NAACP.
Well, I just want to thank you both for all your time, and Before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you'd like to, anything we